What you're about to see is one of the most intense oversight confrontations in recent Senate history. Senator Cory Booker, a former mayor who once worked alongside FBI field agents in Newark, goes head-to-head with FBI Director Kash Patel over allegations of a politically motivated purge inside America's premier law enforcement agency. At stake, the independence of the FBI, the safety of the country, and the question of who is really running the bureau. Watch closely, because the answers are not as simple as either man wants you to believe.
Sir, you don't tell me my time is over.
You
the
know how
people
far
of New
we've
Jersey
come
tell me
since
what my
Utah?
time is.
Senator,
You can't lecture me.
You can tell me
Sir,
my time's over?
You may be the target.
You will see how Senator Cory Booker relentlessly backed FBI Director Kash Patel into a corner over the removal of experienced agents and his direct ties to the White House. I will show you the most explosive moment of this hearing at the very end. Make sure you wait until the end of the video to see it. To understand how Booker built that immense pressure, moving from simple questions to direct accusations of a political purge, you need to see his opening moves. Watch how this confrontation started.
Under my understanding, Senator, that the Department of Justice
You and I both understand the law. Let me finish. I understand under Rule 6 of the Federal Rules of Procedure, a grand jury witness, in this case you, is not barred from sharing their grand jury testimony. This is an oversight hearing. This is germane to your integrity and credibility. You know right now whether or not you testified that President Trump declassified the documents at issue in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. Why are you refusing to answer that simple yes or no question right now?
Because the premise of your question is inaccurate, and
there is no premise to my question, but trying to get to an order of what is truth or not.
How do you How do you know what was asked in the grand jury if you weren't there?
Mr. Patel, this is a mockery you're making of this hearing and simple questions.
It's a simple question. If you have
Mr.
a
Patel,
transcript,
during
you can
your
read
nomination,
the question.
Kash Patel's answer about the Brian Driscoll termination letter shut that door fast. Matter under litigation, cannot discuss. It is a phrase that works as a legal shield, but inside an oversight hearing room, it also functions as something else. It tells the senator and anyone watching that a specific line of inquiry has reached its boundary. By citing active litigation, Patel effectively shut down this specific line of inquiry for the duration of the hearing. Senator Booker did not argue the point. He moved. The next question was about Stephen Miller. Not the termination itself. Not the letter dated October 8, 2025. The question was simpler than that and, in some ways, more revealing. Did you have discussions with Stephen Miller about this particular person? Not that I recall, Patel said. 4 words. Senator Booker pressed further. How often do you speak with Stephen Miller? The answer. Frequently. Patel stated clearly that these conversations happen frequently, a point that remained uncontested on the record. Not occasionally. Not when required by a specific task. Frequently. And the subject of those frequent conversations, according to Patel, was Homeland Security task forces. Senator Booker followed that thread without pausing. He asked whether Miller ever gave his opinions on how to run the FBI. Patel's response reframed it. Miller's interagency operations, he said, were invaluable to the work of the FBI. That is what they discuss. Senator Booker did not challenge that framing directly. He moved to the next question. So you frequently discuss your job and your responsibilities with Stephen Miller? The answer was that Patel also speaks frequently with Attorney General Pam Bondi, and he offered that without hesitation. Absolutely, he said. She's the Attorney General. It was a straightforward acknowledgement, but it placed a clear and specific picture on the table. The FBI director speaks frequently with a senior White House policy advisor.
Pause here, because what just happened matters. Patel has now confirmed on the public record that he speaks frequently with Stephen Miller, a senior White House policy advisor with no formal law enforcement role, about FBI operations. That is not illegal. But it goes to the heart of a question Congress has asked since the FBI's founding. Is this agency independent of political direction, or is it an instrument of the executive? Historically, that line has been fiercely protected. When Booker asks, "Who are you really working for?" he is not being rhetorical. He is testing whether the institutional firewall still exists. What do you think? Does frequency of contact necessarily mean political interference, or is that a leap too far?
And with the Attorney General, who he talks to, how often, and about what, was now part of the formal record of this hearing. That record matters. If you are finding this breakdown helpful in seeing what actually happens in these rooms, take a quick second to subscribe. We are just getting to the most critical part of the hearing. From this point, the hearing shifts from procedural questions to a direct confrontation regarding the FBI's core mission. Senator Booker moved to what he described as the broader picture. He framed it in terms of safety and institutional capacity. He noted that this was the first time in FBI history that neither the director nor the deputy director had any prior experience with the FBI. That is not a small detail. Experience within the Bureau is normally a baseline requirement for leading it, and the continuity of institutional knowledge that comes with experienced leadership is part of how large federal law enforcement agencies maintain their operational effectiveness across administrations. Booker was flagging a departure from that precedent. He said senior agents with decades of knowledge had been pushed out. He talked about what he described as the agency's shift in priorities, specifically toward immigration enforcement. He cited data from the Cato Institute, which he described as a conservative think tank, that found 20% of all FBI agents had been diverted from their regular work to assist with ICE immigration enforcement. 20% is not a marginal reallocation. It represents a significant shift in how a substantial portion of the agency's investigative workforce was being used, away from the areas those agents had been assigned to and trained for. Patel interrupted. He pushed back hard, and immediately. He said the premise of what Booker was describing was entirely false. He did not wait for the question to finish. He launched into numbers. He listed metrics including major arrests, weapons, seizures, rescue operations for vulnerable individuals, and massive quantities of illegal narcotics removed from circulation. He cited specific figures. He was not answering a question at that point. He was presenting a counter-record, a parallel accounting of what the FBI had done, built around operational output rather than organizational structure or personnel decisions. The two men were operating on completely different tracks. Booker was asking about what had been dismantled or redirected. Patel was presenting what had been accomplished. The two tracks did not converge. Before we get to the absolute breaking point of this hearing, I want to hear from you. Do you buy Patel's counter-record? Or do you think Booker's concerns about a political purge are justified? Let me know in the comments. Senator Booker did not accept that as a resolution. He continued. He asked whether agents who investigate organized smuggling rings had been reassigned to immigration enforcement. He asked about task forces working on cases involving Russian oligarchs. He asked about agents assigned to specialized exploitation cases. Patel did not provide direct yes or no responses to those specific questions. Senator Booker acknowledged that directly. He said he had watched that same pattern repeat throughout the entire hearing. The approach, as he described it, was to challenge the premise of the question rather than address its substance. He said it without escalating the tone at that particular moment. He named what he saw, and then he moved to his conclusions, not as questions, not as conditional statements or hypotheticals, as direct statements of what he believed to be true. He said he believed Patel had made the country weaker and less safe. He said he believed the United States was more vulnerable to a major event. He said Patel had gutted the Bureau of Institutional Knowledge, fired or pushed out seasoned officials, many with over 20 years of experience, many working on cases that were critical at the time of their removal. He said hiring standards had been lowered, and he connected that directly to Patel's own admission earlier in the hearing that it would take 14 years to fill the agency's current vacancies. That figure, 14 years, came from Patel's own testimony during the same session. Booker was using it as a measure of the scale of what he described as a purge. He said 20% of FBI agents were doing low-level immigration enforcement instead of their mission-critical work. He said entire task forces had been shut down. Task forces working on election interference, foreign influence operations, public corruption. He asked the follow-on question, Who benefits from shutting down those specific operations? He answered it himself. Corrupt people benefit. Criminals benefit. Vladimir Putin benefits. And then he said, "It makes me wonder who you are looking out for. It makes me think, we cannot trust you as a nation." Towards the end of the exchange, the accumulated tension finally disrupts the formal structure of the hearing. Senator Booker raised the Epstein files. He said Patel had sworn publicly to release them and was now withholding them. He raised what he described as a public claim about a suspect in a serious matter, later walked back. He returned to the FBI personnel removals and said directly that he did not believe Patel had been truthful when he testified under oath that he was not aware of any plans to punish agents associated with the Trump-era criminal investigations. He cited the lawsuit filed by Brian Driscoll and 2 other FBI officials, which alleges that Patel carried out a campaign of retribution against FBI employees for, in the lawsuit's language, failure to demonstrate sufficient political loyalty. He quoted a former FBI official describing Patel's tenure as, in that person's words, generational destruction of the nation's premier law enforcement agency. He said Patel had assaulted the institutional integrity of the FBI in 8 months. Not compromised, not strained, assaulted. He chose that word and did not qualify it. Then he said something that shifted the register of the hearing entirely. He said he knew FBI field agents personally, had worked alongside them in Newark, and that no matter how damaging Patel's leadership turned out to be, it could not erase what those agents had built through decades of work. But it could tarnish the agency's integrity. It could undermine its capacity to function at the level the country depends on. And that, Booker said, was not a theoretical concern. He said he believed it was already happening. He said directly that he did not think Patel was fit to lead the Bureau. And then he made a prediction. He said he did not believe Patel would be around long. He said this might be Patel's last oversight hearing. Not because of any formal process or Senate action, but because Donald Trump, based on the pattern of both his first and current terms, has shown he does not remain loyal to the people around him when they become inconvenient. He said Trump cuts people loose, and that Patel would be no different. These were not procedural statements or questions about agency policy. They were direct, personal, political assessments about what comes next, delivered in a formal hearing with the record open and cameras on both men. Patel sat at the witness table through all of it. Then Booker shifted register one more time. He said he was going to pray for Patel. He said he prayed that Patel could step up, defend his oath, defend the Constitution, and do a better job of defending the country. It was a closing line that moved the exchange from confrontation into something harder to categorize. This final comment triggers a complete breakdown in the hearing's standard procedure. What followed was not how Senate oversight hearings are supposed to end.
It's my time, not yours.
My God.
If you want to talk about
dividing this country,
it is my
I follow
time.
you on your social media posts that
It is
tear
my
this country
time
apart.
to
There
address
should be a
your
unifying-
falsehoods.
Oh,
You are an
you can try
embarrassment
all
to the
you
division
want
in this country.
to not
Senator,
take
it is my
responsibility
time.
for what
You
you
had
have
your
said.
time.
Sir, you're
Your
making a
time is
mockery of this
over.
committee. Sir, you don't tell me my time is over.
You
The
know how
people
far
of New
we've
Jersey
come
tell me
since
what my
Utah?
time is.
Senator,
You can't lecture me.
you can tell me
Sir,
my time's over?
You may be the charge of the
I'm not
FBI,
going anywhere.
but I am not afraid of you, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Not afraid of you.
Mr. Chairman, point
What the
of order.
transcript shows, taken strictly on its own terms, is 2 men with fundamentally different accounts of the same reality. Senator Booker came to that hearing with specific allegations, specific names, specific documents referenced, and specific questions that he kept returning to when they went unanswered. Director Patel came with a set of metrics, a counter record of arrests and seizures and operational results, and a consistent posture of challenging the premise of questions rather than engaging their substance directly. That dynamic is not incidental. It is the core of what this exchange revealed. When Senator Booker asked whether agents investigating organized smuggling rings had been reassigned to immigration enforcement, Patel did not say no. He challenged the framing. When Booker asked about the grand jury testimony, Patel redirected to the transcript that has not been publicly released. When Booker asked about the Brian Driscoll termination, Patel cited active litigation. Each of those responses is individually defensible. A legal proceeding is a legitimate reason not to discuss a termination in an open hearing. A grand jury transcript is the most reliable record of what was said under oath. But taken together, across the full length of this exchange, the pattern produced something specific. A hearing in which the senator asking oversight questions did not receive direct answers to several of them. That is not the same as saying those answers do not exist or that Patel's positions are wrong. What the transcript documents is what happened when those positions were tested by direct questioning in a formal setting over an extended period on multiple consecutive subjects. Patel's counter record is real. The numbers he cited, arrests, seizures, rescue operations for vulnerable individuals, massive quantities of illegal narcotics removed from the streets, counterintelligence cases opened and closed, are verifiable claims about FBI operational output. He presented those figures not once, but twice in the same hearing, the second time in his formal response after Booker's closing statement. He was doing what agency leaders do at oversight hearings, presenting evidence that their agency is functioning and producing results that can be measured. His argument was consistent and clearly stated. You cannot call this a failure when these are the numbers on the board. Senator Booker's argument was equally consistent and equally clearly stated. Operational arrest and seizure figures do not answer questions about whether experienced personnel were removed for reasons tied to political loyalty rather than performance. They do not explain under what authority Brian Driscoll was terminated under a letter invoking Article 2 of the Constitution, which is the President's authority, not the FBI director's. They do not address whether task forces were disbanded or why trained agents were pulled away from the work they had spent years developing expertise in. Booker's position, stated repeatedly and without qualification, was that the metrics Patel offered were not responsive to what he was actually asking. Two different frameworks of accountability were operating in that room simultaneously. They did not intersect. The exchange about Stephen Miller sits at the center of the broader institutional question running through the entire hearing. How is the FBI being directed? And by whom? And through what channels? Patel said he speaks with Miller frequently, in the context of Homeland Security task forces, and that those conversations are operationally valuable to the Bureau. Booker did not accept that framing as sufficient. The frequency of contact between the FBI director and a senior White House policy advisor, and the nature of what they discuss, goes directly to the question of institutional independence. Whether decisions about FBI personnel and priorities are being made inside the Bureau or are being shaped by external political direction is not a narrow procedural question. It is one of the central questions that congressional oversight of the FBI is designed to examine. That line of inquiry did not get resolved in this hearing. It got placed on the record. Now look at how the hearing ended. Not with a procedural close, not with a formal adjournment. With both men talking at once, neither backing down, a point of order called from the chair. Booker said it was his time. Patel said he was not going anywhere. Booker said the people of New Jersey tell him when his time is. Patel said he was not afraid. That is not a policy exchange. That is two men in a formal government setting refusing, at the same moment, to yield to the other. The structure of the hearing did not contain what happened between them at the end. That final sequence matters because it reveals something the earlier questioning had only suggested. This was not a hearing where the witness waited for the senator's cues, gave measured non-answers designed to run out the clock, and stayed within the formal conventions of the proceeding. Patel challenged throughout. He interrupted. He reframed questions in real time and contested the assumptions behind them. Booker matched that and went further. He named the pattern out loud, challenged Patel's fitness for his role on the public record, delivered a closing statement that most oversight hearings never see, and then, when Patel responded before his time, pushed back hard enough that the chairman had to call a point of order. The procedural breakdown at the end was the inevitable result of two conflicting approaches to congressional oversight. What this hearing did not settle is the underlying factual dispute. Whether FBI personnel were removed for legitimate performance reasons or for reasons tied to political loyalty is not something a Senate transcript proves in either direction. The lawsuit filed by Brian Driscoll and other officials makes specific allegations about retribution and political screening, but those are allegations in active litigation and have not been adjudicated. Whether task forces were dismantled in ways that have materially reduced the Bureau's capacity in counterterrorism, foreign influence, and public corruption is a question a single oversight hearing cannot definitively answer. Whether the 20% figure on agent reassignment represents a fundamental shift in the agency's mission or a time-limited operational adjustment is contested. The record does not resolve those questions. It documents that they were asked. What this hearing does establish is where each man stood, what each was willing to say in public and on the record, what each refused to answer directly, and what happened in that room when those two positions collided without either man stepping back. Senator Booker laid out a detailed, sustained argument that Patel's leadership has degraded the Bureau's capacity, compromised its independence from political direction, and made the country less safe. Patel laid out a sustained counter-argument rooted in operational output, challenging the premises of Booker's questions and presenting a record of what the FBI has accomplished during his tenure. Neither man persuaded the other. That was not what the hearing was for.
Here's the honest takeaway. This hearing did not resolve the central dispute, it documented it. Senator Booker left with his arguments on the record, specific, sustained, and largely unanswered on substance. Director Patel left with his counter-record intact, operational metrics, challenged premises, and legal shields that are each individually valid. Neither man persuaded the other, because that was never the point. Congressional oversight is a pressure test designed to make institutions answer for themselves in public. The deeper questions about FBI independence, personnel removals, and disbanded task forces remain open. They will be answered in courtrooms, in investigative reporting, and ultimately in elections. So, did Booker's questioning reveal a genuine pattern of political interference, or was it an overreach? Did Patel's operational record constitute a real defense, or a deflection? Drop your honest take in the comments. And if you want more clear-eyed, fact-first breakdowns of the hearings shaping American democracy, hit subscribe and share this with someone who wants to know what's really happening in Washington.
It was for putting things on the record, and on that count it delivered in full. Every question Booker asked is on the record. Every answer Patel gave, and every answer he declined to give, is on the record. The dispute over whose time it was and who gets to speak last, the declaration of not being afraid, the point of order from the chair, all of it is on the record. That record is public, and anyone can read it. The record of this showdown is now public, but the debate over the future of the FBI is just beginning. Who do you think won this exchange? Booker with his relentless oversight, or Patel with his operational numbers? Drop your honest take in the comments below. If you want more deep dive breakdowns of the congressional hearings the media glosses over, hit the subscribe button. I will see you in the next one.